Welcome, Annie Collins here for In Love Arts. Today we'll be creating this lovely thank you card. Let's go over some of the products I used to create this card. From In Love Arts, the stamp set called Waiting Girls. This has two images of a little girl. It's the same little girl but in different poses. And I'll be using the one of her standing, two images of flowers, some leaves, and I'll be using the thank you sentiment. I went ahead and stamped and colored and cut our girl and our flowers and leaves. I colored her up using Copic markers, and I colored her dress in a nice violet. I did her flowers to be sunflowers, and there's two different styles of flowers, and I'll show you here in a second. And I also colored our leaves here. We have a full sunflower here, and then there's the little half one, or like it's open facing up. There you go. So now those are our images. I'm going to set them aside for a second and go over our paper. We have layering cardstock in cream, which we're going to use for our background. We're going to use it to create our sky. Rinea foiled paper in Starstruck gold, and I used that to die cut a frame out of it. Fawn knit picky, the green stitch one. I used a hillside border die for that to create a little grass, and a layering cardstock in a similar violet to the girl's dress. An A2 side folding heavy 110-pound cardstock card base. This is distressed oxide and tumbled glass. We're going to use that to create our clouds and a cloud stencil and our blending brush. We're going to bring in some Versafine Onyx black ink for our sentiment. So I'm going to clear everything off my desk so that we can get started on our project. Here's another look at what we'll be creating today. So we're going to start with the cream layering cardstock, the tumbled glass distressed oxide, and our cloud stencil. You can start either from the top or the bottom to create your clouds. I'm going to start from the bottom today, and I'm just making sure to turn my stencil so that I have a different cloud shape every time. Every time I ink up my blender brush, I tap it off on my stencil before I can move on to create my clouds. And I move pretty quickly, and I just want to make sure I get it all the way to the top, even if that doesn't show. I wasn't sure how much would show because of the little frame. So I gave it a nice blending once over just to make sure everything went smooth. Now we're going to start adhering our frame layers. So I start with my frame and I place it facing down. You'll know because you can see the little stars really well. That's the right facing way. The bottom facing way, you can see the stars, but they're kind of not as clear. I'm going to adhere the little hillside mound I die cut from the Lawn Fawn paper, and I have a little overhang, and that's fine. I'm just going to trim that off. I always cut it a little bit bigger just to make sure I have a nice fit. Once I have that all adhere, I'm going to adhere the frame now to our cloud background. And I'm using a little bit of art glitter glue here, and I'm using that because it gives me a little wiggle room to adjust and line everything up. Now I'm going to go ahead and press that down into place and trim off any of the excess that we may have. You could do this with your scissors like I'm doing, or with your trimmer. I just figured I'd use my scissors because they were quite handy. Get this last little sliver out and clear that up. All right, so now we can, I need to adhere one little section. All right, so now we're going to stamp our sentiment. I'm going to bring it in. It's the thank you sentiment from the stamp set. And I want to place it towards the top of our little framed area, sort of basically in the sky. I'm going to bring in our Versafine Onyx black ink. I'm going to get that all inked up and stamped. I'm going to do my best to get this on as straight as possible, being that I'm stamping from a different angle. What I'm doing here is I'm stamping it off on a piece of scrap paper just to make sure that it's nice and crisp. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and line this up and get it stamped onto our little panel here. I'm pressing firmly, but not so hard because I don't want to distort our sentiment. Now we're going to bring in our little girl. I went ahead and put foam adhesive on the back of her. I saved you the watching of that, cutting tiny strips of foam adhesive. And I'm going to place her in the center. Now for her little, I want her to hold one of these flowers. So I cut a little thin strip of green cardstock. And I'm going to adhere the leaves and the flower bud area to that. So I adhere the leaves to the center of that stem. And then I'll adhere the flower bud to the top. And I'm using one of those open or the down facing sunflowers. Alright, so now I'm going to place it here, get an idea of how much, where I want it. And I realize the stem's a little bit longer than what I want, so I'm going to trim it off. Add a little more art glitter glue to the back of it and adhere it to our girl. Just below, just at her chin, from her chin down. Now to give it a little oomph, I'm going to bring in a gold glitter pen. This is a Sakura metallic gold, and I'm going to add little dots to her hair ties, the little band in her dress, and to the center of our sunflower. Being that we have that gold frame, I wanted to bring a little more gold into our image. And I'm going to put little dots on her shoes, like little embellishments on her shoes as well. So now we're going to adhere this panel and our layering panel to our card base or our card. So I'm going to first start with our violet one. I'm going to put that down first. Get that all on there, which is the same size as our card front, which is 8 as our card base, which is A2 size, which is 4.5. Nope, 4.25 by 5.5. Yep. And then I'm going to adhere this little panel here to the center. Now I'm going to embellish the frame a little bit more with the extra sunflowers. I'm just going to adhere two to each corner, and then I'll tuck in some leaves. I do use both styles of the sunflowers in the corners. And then the leaves, they stamp out in a trio, but I just cut them apart. I left two together for the stem that she's holding, and then the other ones I just cut them apart to be my filler. As you can see here, I just snip and just maneuver this last leaf in the bottom here. Okay, so I like the way that looks, but I'm going to add one more to the top here. So I'm going to gently pull up my frame, tuck my leaves beneath it, and then I'll adhere the little sunflower on top. Just a nice finishing touch to bring that sunflowers up towards the top. Again, I'm going to bring in our gel pen to add a little gold finishes so that they match the flower that she's holding. And it also brings that gold all around our card. And that's basically it. Our card is complete. Oh, except that I realized her eyes aren't so prominent, so I went ahead and darkened them with a little black gel pen. And then I put back the highlight with a white gel pen. And then now our card is complete. So like always, I'll have everything listed that I used in the description box. And my coordinating blog post will have all the Copic markers that I used. Once again, this is In Love Art's Waiting Girl stamp set. There's another little girl. She was the same little girl, but she's in a different pose. I'm going to create another card with her, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found some inspiration, and I hope that you will like and subscribe